Have you ever heard of the Melungeons? Maybe not. They don't appear in many history books. They aren't often mentioned in schools. And yet, they carry a deep story, one that speaks of survival, identity, and injustice. Let's go back in time to the rolling hills of Appalachia, where winding dirt roads disappear into thick forests, and small wooden houses sit quietly against the mountains. This is where the Melungeons lived. They were different, but not in the way some claimed. Not dangerous, not inferior, just different. The Melungeons were families of mixed ancestry, a blend of European, African, and Native American blood. They settled in parts of Tennessee, Virginia, and Kentucky, living simple lives, farming, hunting, raising children. And although they often looked like their white neighbors, they were treated differently. Why? Because science at the time said they were less. In the 1800s and early 1900s, something strange and dangerous was happening in America. It was the rise of scientific racism, a time when science wasn't always used to discover truth, but instead to support power and prejudice. Anthropologists, doctors, and even government officials tried to rank human beings by race. They believed some races were smarter, more civilized, more fit to lead, and others? They were called degenerate, feeble-minded, even dangerous to society. This is where the Melungeons come in, because they didn't fit the neat categories of white or black, because they were somewhere in between. They became targets. Early scholars began labeling them as a mysterious race. Some even said they were from ancient Portuguese sailors. Others claimed they were from Turkish slaves, or from a lost tribe of Israel. The truth? They were American, just like everyone else. But science at the time wasn't looking for the truth. It was looking for someone to blame, someone to push down. In 1890, a physician named Dr. William G. Frost, president of Berea College in Kentucky, wrote about the people of Appalachia. He spoke of mountain whites as pure Anglo-Saxon stock, but he made one exception: the Melungeons. He described them as impure, a mixed race that lived outside of civilized society. Dangerous, lazy, untrustworthy. Where did he get this idea? Not from evidence, not from facts, but from bias and from a growing movement in American science that sought to define worth by blood. And so, the Melungeons were pushed into the shadows. In court records, they were sometimes labeled as free persons of color. In some cases, that meant they couldn't vote, or own land, or marry who they loved, even if they looked white, even if they lived just like their white neighbors. They were treated differently because of rumors, and because of what so-called experts said about their ancestry. Around the same time, another dangerous idea was taking hold. It was called eugenics, the belief that only certain people should be allowed to have children, that society could be improved by stopping those with bad genes from reproducing. Melungeons and other poor Appalachian families were often caught in this net. They were accused of being unfit, of being burdens to society, and some were even sterilized, without their consent, without justice. Imagine living in a quiet mountain town, raising your family, and being told by the government that your blood is a problem, that your ancestry is a disease. This wasn't just an idea, it was policy. From the 1920s through the 1970s, thousands of Americans were sterilized in the name of science. Many of them were poor, many of them were women, and many of them were from Appalachian communities like the Melungeons, all because they were seen as less. But who decides who is less? Science should be about discovery, about understanding the world. But in those years, science was used to divide, to label, to control, to exclude, and the Melungeons were caught in the middle. Yet despite this, they survived. They built families, held on to traditions, kept their history alive, even as others tried to erase it. And in the 1990s, something powerful happened. Modern genetics entered the scene. For the first time, Melungeon descendants could test their DNA. They could see the truth for themselves. And the results? They confirmed what Melungeons always knew. They were a rich mix of African, European, and Native American ancestry. They weren't degenerate. They weren't less. They were American, in every sense of the word. And slowly, the world began to listen. Stories came out. Books were written. Communities that had once been ashamed of the name Melungeon now wear it with pride, because being mixed is not a flaw. It's a story, a legacy, a strength. Even today, many Americans have never heard the word Melungeon. And that silence, it wasn't an accident. It was the result of generations of shame, whispers passed down from grandparents to grandchildren, of families told not to ask questions, not to dig too deep. Why? Because for years, being called a Melungeon was used as an insult. It meant you weren't white. It meant you weren't welcome. It meant you were less. In some towns, children were bullied if someone thought they had Melungeon blood. Parents warned them not to marry outside certain circles. And if you tried to fit in, someone was always there to remind you were different. And this wasn't just social judgment. In some states, people who were classified as colored couldn't attend public schools with whites. They couldn't ride in the same train cars or be buried in the same cemeteries. So many Melungeon families who could pass as white did just that. They kept silent. They hid their ancestry. They changed names, moved towns, cut off ties with cousins who looked darker. But silence carries a cost. Generations grew up not knowing who they truly were. Families were divided, histories forgotten. And worst of all, the shame grew, not because of what the Melungeons were, but because of what others said about them. Let's pause here and ask a deeper question. Why were these people called inferior? What made scientists, teachers, and lawmakers so determined to put them in a lower class? Was it the way they spoke, the way they dressed, the color of their skin, or was it simply fear? Fear of difference, fear of what couldn't be controlled, fear of a world that didn't fit inside neat little boxes. Science, when guided by fear, can become dangerous. It stops asking questions and starts making judgments. And that's exactly what happened with the Melungeons. By the early 20th century, newspapers were printing stories about them, calling them racial oddities, claiming they were unhealthy, prone to crime, even cursed. Some reports described them as reclusive mountain people with swarthy skin and strange customs. None of it was based on fact. It was based on myth. But myths, when repeated often enough, start to sound like truth. Let's look at the bigger picture. The Melungeons were not the only group in Appalachia to be treated this way. Other families with mixed ancestry, like the Chestnut Ridge people in West Virginia or the Carmel Indians in Ohio, were also labeled as triracial isolates. This term was used by anthropologists to mean not white, not black, not native, but something in between. And in their eyes, in between meant inferior. These labels weren't just offensive. They were used to take away rights, to block people from voting, to strip away dignity, to erase cultures, all in the name of science. But real science evolves. In the 21st century, researchers began revisiting the Melungeon story. They began interviewing families, collecting records, and most importantly, they started listening. And the truth that emerged, it shattered the old lies. DNA testing confirmed that Melungeons were not a mystery. They were not broken. They were not inferior. They were Americans, with ancestry stretching across continents, from Africa, from Europe, from the native peoples of this land. And that's not a weakness. It's a strength. In fact, isn't that what America is all about? A nation of many people, many stories, woven together into one. But for the Melungeons, that truth came late. Too late for some. Too late for those who were sterilized. Too late for those who were denied education. Too late for those who died never knowing who they really were. So what do we do with this history? Do we bury it? Forget it? Or do we learn? Do we honor those who were mislabeled and mistreated by telling their stories? Today, many Melungeon descendants are reclaiming their identity, where families gather, share stories, and celebrate their roots. There are festivals. There are books. There are DNA studies, and for the first time in generations, there is pride, not shame, because the truth set them free. But this isn't just about the Melungeons. This is about how science can be used to hurt or to heal. It's a reminder that facts can be twisted, that labels can destroy lives, and that real understanding takes time, humility, and open ears. The Melungeons remind us that people are more than blood, more than skin color, more than ancestry. They are stories. They are survivors. They are family. It's easy to look back now and say, how could they have believed that? How could trained scientists, respected doctors, and powerful lawmakers look at a peaceful community in the hills and call them degenerate? But that's what happens when science forgets its purpose, when it stops searching for truth and starts serving power. And in that dark chapter of American history, science forgot the human heart. It forgot the family gatherings, the mountain songs, the recipes passed down through generations, the laughter of children playing in the woods. It forgot the people. In those hills, Melungeon families weren't writing history books. They weren't leading universities. They weren't on national radio. They were just living, working the land, raising children, hoping for a better life. But in the eyes of the powerful, that wasn't enough. They needed labels. They needed boxes. They needed someone to be less, so others could feel like more. And so the Melungeons were branded, not by their actions, not by their beliefs, but by their blood. And once that label was there, it followed them into courtrooms, into schools, into hospitals, and into silence. But here's the beautiful truth. They endured in the quiet, in the margins, in the places no one thought to look. They endured, and now their voices are rising. Today, Melungeon descendants are asking hard questions. They're digging through records. They're opening up family Bibles. They're tracing their DNA. They're piecing together a puzzle that was scattered for generations. And what they're finding isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. Their story is one of resilience, of people who kept going, even when the world told them to disappear. It's a story that matters, not just to Melungeons, but to all of us. Because when we understand what happened to them, we start to see what's been happening to others. Indigenous families, Black communities, Latino migrants, poor white Appalachians. So many have felt the sting of being labeled less. And every time, the reason is the same. Fear. Fear of difference. Fear of change. Fear of truth. But when we face that fear, when we look back at what was done, we open the door to healing. Healing doesn't erase the past, but it can help us carry it with dignity, with understanding, with grace. So the next time someone tells you a story about who they are, where they come from, and what they carry in their blood, listen, because blood is not shame. It's life, it's memory, it's legacy. And the Melungeons, their legacy is not one of shame, but of quiet strength. They were mislabeled, misunderstood, pushed aside, but they kept walking, kept loving, kept remembering. And now, finally, we remember them too. Not as a degenerate race, not as a mystery, but as part of the American story, a story that belongs to all of us. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, share it with someone who loves history. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shine a light on hidden truths.